The Todd Shapiro Show.
Time to hit the button!
On Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.
Okay, here we go. My man. I think he's back home being, Southern California. Our boy, Lance Lambert. Hi, Lance.
What is happening, man? I think you do a better job keeping track of me than I do.
I'm your EA. I don't know if you know that. I've been hired to be your EA. You didn't even know that. I'm getting paid. That's what I get paid to do.
I know exactly right.
We got your avocado. We got your avocado salad coming up next, and a new helmet for one of your bikes.
And I have plenty of avo toast hanging out at the hipster lounges in Spain, that's for sure.
Is there a lot of avocado? Can I ask you a question? This is a good question. I'm going to be honest. I'm just going to come right out and say it. In the cannabis space, in the day it was like hippie this, hippie that, but now it's like more hipster this, hipster that. Is there still a stereotype that prefers the cannabis, or is it everybody?
It's really everybody. But it does depend on what event or show you partake in. There's definitely some that still very much embrace the culture. Some in yesteryears might have called it counterculture, but again, growing up in Northern California, it was kind of the only culture we knew. That and the yuppies back in the 80s. But, it's, you go to a cannabis cup over there with our friends at High Times or even a dope cup, and you definitely see the culture is live and strong. Happy to say you see the teddy bears with the deadhead stickers.
Yep.
All the fun attire that you and I are accustomed to growing up to, even occasional tie-dye here and there. But I'd say for the most part, there's this whole mainstream section that is focused more on the hipster kind of style as far as they're very much incorporating artistic installs at some of these events, as well as some healthy food options that might be CBD infused, a lot of tinctures, cannabis kombucha I came across for the first time in Eugene, Oregon last month. So that was really cool. Even Jelly Bellies are coming out with a CBD-infused iteration after how many decades of being around in California. So it definitely, as it becomes more mainstream worldwide and domestically, the culture has changed quite a bit.
Lance, can you speak to the culture that you speak of and their feelings on, because we haven't really delved into the emotional side of the industry that much. We talk a lot about great news updates and great product launches and this kind of stuff. But the actual, is there conflict within that community you speak of, and then the sort of the capitalistic now, big business, big stock side? Is there a bit of a divide there, or is everyone coming together?
There's a slight. I'd say one thing, just speaking first from the B2B side, you go to several of these events, no matter if MJ Biz or NCIA or even Lift Expos or O'Cannabis up in your neck of the woods. And it is still an oddity for most to see these people in full three-piece suits. We still kind of associate that with investors or lawyers or DEA, law enforcement. But having said that, I do remember about 4 or 5 years ago, even at those type of events, you would see friends like Ed Rosenthal or Frenchie Cannoli wearing, these kind of cannabis flower-themed suits and such. And again, you'd see a bit more of the tie-dye and all that. And it's been suppressed a bit because even the people that were a part of the counterculture and very much the trailblazers or leaders in the legalization, they have recognized that in order for it to be adopted mainstream, a little bit of that stigma has to be pushed aside. And again, we've talked about how Hollywood's a bit at fault for that just as much as any other. But it is one thing that it is shifting. Having said that, you don't see those people at some of, again, the more culturally involved, like Mardi Gras, which is this, I believe I've spoken of before, but Mardi Gras is this annual event. They just had their 26th-year anniversary last year, and it's held in a little town called Nimbin, about an hour and a half off the coast in New South Wales, Australia. You would not see a suit, let alone anyone in a polo shirt. That still is very much hemp-based. You get kind of there's some trustafarians, there's some hipsters, but you still have some of these true hippie-style kids that are all about embracing nature, embracing culture, and focusing more so on Eastern medicine versus the modern Western medicine. So,
how much of Lance Lambert? How much of these sort of hipster style, hippie style I won't say kids, but call them 20, 30, 40, even 50-year-olds who really understand the plant, really know how to grow the plant, really know how to make products of the plant. How many of them are trying to also capitalize on that in a mom and pop shop or a business or get acquired? Like, are we seeing a lot of product base going more mainstream from the community itself?
Yeah, we do, because a lot of those individuals are the ones who have done the R&D and the studies around what works and what doesn't, and the right infusions to come with. So we see some of that craft coming around concentrates more so than the flower itself. As far as the flower breaks out with the culture, you have the boutique or hoop growers, as we call them here in California, and then you have the large-scale mainstream growers like LPs up in Canada. Now, that does have quite a bit divide between the two, but we see crossover on the edible side because of people having these phenomenal recipes that they've mastered over the years, whether it be only medical or black market where they lived. Also is the case for concentrates. We sponsored an event called Masters of Rosin over in Barcelona during Spanibus last week.
There's way too many puns for all these names. Way too many puns. Spanibus, Mardi Gras. I mean, how many are the Masters? How many more? How many more can we have?
Oh my gosh!
You think your pot smokers would be more creative, for crying out loud?
Well, we're making some sort of influence. The international Pantone color was green in 2018. So
okay.
I think this industry has an influence.
You're right. Even the Leafs changed their jerseys for St. Pat's Day for one game.
Exactly. But yeah, it's, that event, you had someone like, again, Frenchie Cannoli, who's very old school, making his bubble hash. But then you have a friend of ours, Nick, who's, just as much a master of his craft and maybe, a handful of years younger than you and I. But still, he's the younger generation that does bring more of that kind of edginess to it, more so than the kind of hippie style. So there's some healthy crossover, and you can't argue. A lot of those that were in the industry before it was legal are the ones who do know the craft best. So no matter how buttoned up some of these organizations are, they are still leaning on these individuals that used to very much be doing business in the shadows, as we say.
There was a really interesting study that came out this week, Lance Lambert. I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, but they sort of said that there was a link between cannabis and psychosis, and it was a little more complicated than that. But basically, the study announced that potent cannabis significantly increases the risk of psychosis. So much so, found the authors that the Lancet paper that around 30% of first episode psychosis experiences in London and about 50% of those in Amsterdam, they said could have been prevented if high potency cannabis were not available in those cities. What do you think of that?
That is interesting. I did see a story come out, I believe it was from USA Today down here in the States, and psychosis has been a topic that's been brought up around the plant for several decades now. Although most of the studying relating to it was on the privatized sector because of lack of legalization. That is one thing that you talk to people, and it's interesting because there's a mainstream stereotype about cannabis and its attributes, whereas you don't hear it quite the same in alcohol. Again, the metaphor I use, because my mom, firsthand I can speak, she says, she's not a big fan, although her boyfriend consumes cannabis. I consume cannabis from a medical standpoint. She's like, I just don't know. I don't like how it makes me feel. I feel loopy. And I said, well, Mom, that's like me going on spring break to Mexico, getting drunk off tequila and saying I was never going to drink again. I just need to figure out what worked with me and what worked with my body at that point in time. And most people do that. They recognize what they do and don't like to drink, what they do and don't like to eat. And the same thing occurs for cannabis. A big thing that is the outlier in that equation, though, and you touched on it, is the potency. So the fact that we've seen a 3 to 4x increase in potency over the last handful of years, that's kind of scary, because when you and I were kids, we were looking at anywhere from like a conservative 4 or 5% THC up to maybe a 9 or 10% THC from what we call land race.
Well, what are you talking about, Lance? I've never touched the product in my life.
In hypothetical sense.
Let alone when I was a kid. How dare you?
Oh man!
No, but that is interesting. Rarely do you go and get a tequila, or say like for me, Crown Royal would have been my drink maybe, but it's not like I'm drinking a Crown Royal. No, that's 4 times the amount of alcohol percentage in there.
Exactly, and that's what we're talking about. Is so just like the prohibition that occurred with alcohol around the states. At first, when it came to legal. There was still white lightning. There was still high octane alcohol being put out, but most people didn't want to drink 80, 100 proof liquor. They wanted to sip on a wine. They wanted to sip on a beer. They wanted to actually enjoy it and have a mild buzz. That's the same thing that, interesting enough, we see in this industry. There's still this race to the top in THC, and in some of these strains, you'd have to get the testing corrected, because I don't believe anything over the low 30s, but some claim to be 36, 38% THC. I would say more of the realistic high end with true testing is the low 30s, but still you're talking about, again, 4 or 5 times used to what compared to what someone used to consume back in their high school or college days. It might be picking up cannabis again as an alternative to other things to consume. So it goes back to the whole, start low, go slow. Just take an even pace. Keep in mind that it's not the stuff you might have consumed when you were a kid or when you were younger or when you did that backpacking trip through Amsterdam. Keep in mind that there's safer ways to consume. Although I know the easiest way to consume is via edible, I don't necessarily recommend that because there's so many variables between our GI system, full or empty stomach, what your metabolism is like. So it's very comparable to alcohol as opposed to a vape pen, which is a very controlled dose. And these are things that are coming into fruition in the Canadian market as of October 17th this year. So it's good for your listeners to be cognizant of this and know if they are going to take it up and try something besides smoking because they don't feel that's the safest avenue, to make sure that you do something that allows you to meter that low dosage and just go slow.
Couldn't agree more. And, we sort of always end up getting back to the same point, but we're very privileged on this show to be able to educate and to talk, and again, not make claims or medical claims or this or that, or not promote or encourage, but just to educate. And I've started to notice a lot more mainstream media outlets are sort of doing the same thing. I always feel like I'm kind of first to market on this stuff, and everyone's afraid, and yet you're starting to see now more cannabis experts, and it really it's interesting because one, I think it's great because the more the merrier in terms of learning and education. But the other thing is when you compare it to alcohol, it really is interesting that other than the odd doctor that will kind of go on these strong rants and to be careful how you're sort of putting poison in your body. And listen, keep in mind, I'm a guy who's, full disclosure, I'm a minority steak owner in a brewery. But the education on drinking seems to be lost too. And I think we should be piggybacking on what we're learning about cannabis. And even though, prohibition ended, 80 years ago, 100 years ago, I guess now for alcohol, that's something that is never too late to start getting into as well.
Yeah, it's 100%. Again, everyone has their personal opinion of it, but at the end of the day, to your point, the one thing that occurs no matter which of these two products that you're consuming we speak of, it is mind-altering. It does alter in some way the condition overall of your body and the way that you react, respond, the way that you interact and engage. So you very much want to be cognizant and aware of your surroundings and what you're doing when you're doing it. And I love the fact that you do disclaim, hey, we always make sure to not consume and drive, make sure to not drink and drive. These are things that are very important, and both you and I are huge advocates of the educational aspect of it, and that's the best way to go. I mean, that's a study that just came out in Colorado, being the first state to legalize from an adult use standpoint. And one thing that they found is Denver proved a reduction they proved that going by way of education versus prohibition is what keeps kids away from cannabis. So just helping children understand, what this is, rather it be looked at as a medicine or a recreational product, and knowing that there's a time and place when you'll be able to consume. And it's not in your childhood, it's not in your adolescence, it's at adult age in many areas of the world, 19 or 21 and up. And we need to make sure they understand that, because there are things that when your body's continuing to develop, you don't want to introduce outside factors to that. And so I'm a huge, huge advocate of making sure the education is always led in any market.
Lance Lambert from Boveda.com. These are two-way humidity control packs, the global leader in two-way humidity control for the flower, for guitars, even put them in your cigars too, act as a humidor. Is there any new developments, Lance, and just sort of that legalization process in America? Have we, or new states, or where are we at? I ask you this every week, but where are we at now?
No, where we're at now, if getting into the political really quick, Governor Cuomo, our governor out of the state of New York, is very much trying to move forward on legalization and is hoping for legalization by June. That's something that's a bit aggressive, but we'd love to see it come into fruition by square mileage and overall population, it is the densest populated city and state in the union, and therefore one of the highest consumption numbers. So the fact that they would go legal, I think, would very much help them out from a taxation standpoint. And then we have things happening around the world. Israel, which already has a medical program and has 40,000 out of the 7 million occupants of that country on the medical program. There's a right-winger who's looking to run parliament and very much is leading this Prime Minister, Benjamin, that is leading with the whole legalization of cannabis. And he's getting a lot of the younger generations, the Z generation, the Y generation behind him because they fully support that. And that is interesting enough, another country that has a high level, 21% on average of that population consumes cannabis, according to UNDOC. So that's big news as well. Ottawa, estimates are up to 10,000 Canadians should be pardoned by a proposed cannabis amnesty bill. I think that's awesome, again, that we're hearing of more amnesty up in Canada. I mean, there's people who it's really sad to say. Now, you and I can look back at it. We know how serious it was to be caught with a gram or caught with an eighth back when we were younger.
I don't know what you're talking about, Lance. How dare you even think I would hang out with anybody who would ever have a dime bag on him, for goodness sakes.
Oh, you know what a dime bag is? That's nice. So I think it is. We think back, and that was serious, man. But you look at it now, and who was that hurting? I mean, we talked about it last year when LAX down here, my local international airport, they cleared it with the FAA and announced that you could travel with up to 28.5 grams, or in other words, an ounce of cannabis. There's people who have been put away for years and had the trajectory of their future altered forever based on possession of something as simple as an eighth. And that's applicable in your country as much as mine. So I love to hear places like Ottawa and places like Boston and San Diego that are coming to their senses and going, hey, we need to make things right. This is something that we're now recognizing maybe shouldn't have been made illegal in the first place. So for them to take the step to right the wrong, I think speaks volumes. And
on top of it, we're now at a point in America, especially where you're getting a poll showing that 2 of 3 people, even a little bit more, up to 70% on some, are saying, hey, let's just legalize the damn thing. So, that's got to be putting a little bit of pressure on the politicians to not only just pardon in the past, but to move forward in the future like Canada has.
Yeah, I believe that 100% too. I mean, that's something that you're right. It's a majority vote. We've talked about how it's nonpartisan. People are just ready to move on. It's one more. Everybody needs more money, more taxes for supporting our infrastructures, our educational system, our law enforcement programs, our municipalities. This is an excellent source for it. Why let it go to black market? Why let it go to drug czars to the south of us? These are all things that do matter and do make an impact. So, again, I love the fact that North America in general has that overall same mentality towards legalization from a safe standpoint. I mean, it's one thing. I've had a few friends up in your neck of the woods that are like, I can't believe they're saying an average dose should be 5 milligrams for edibles. I don't think that's unrealistic. Although our standard here in most states is 10 milligrams, I've always said I thought that was a bit high, because if the first time someone was ever going to try a concentrate, they had 10 milligrams, that could kind of set them off. That'd be comparable to 3 drinks, in my opinion, for many people, especially based on their tolerance. So I like the fact that Canada is kind of taking their own path, and in many respects around some regulations, and they know that it's not permanent.
I lost you a little bit there on the end there. Your phone just cut out, Lance. But we do appreciate everything you share with us every week. Next week, do me a favor. Let's focus on job creation and economy and numbers and things like that, because that's a real big feature in what's going on within the entire industry. And to be honest, in a time right now where a lot of people are fearing recessions and setbacks and financial strains, the cannabis industry, in fact, is employing thousands and thousands. It's the fastest growing sector in the United States. So I'd like to sort of delve into that a little bit next week, if that's cool.
Yeah, for sure. We'll talk about some numbers. $19 billion in 2019 is a good start, and you're right, several 100,000 jobs. So I'd love to get into how it's affecting, the country as a whole.
Yeah, maybe even sort of sharing us with some jobs that we wouldn't expect that would be in the industry. So some sort of surprise things that I always look at it as even trucking, like transport. There's so many different things that people don't think of going, the legal and compliance and all this different stuff. So it's really, I think we should all feel very blessed that a flower that should probably have never been decriminalized in the first place is Finally, the world seems, with as technology as advanced as we are, going back to the oldest form of a flower that was around when dinosaurs were. It's all kind of really interesting extremes that are coming together. Thank you very much, Lance, for your time, and thank you for all of Boveda Inc.'s bovedainc.com support.
Yeah, thank you so much, Todd. It's always a pleasure, and look forward to talking to you next week.
Awesome, man. Lance Lambert, everybody, from bovedainc.com, Boveda, two-way humidity control packs. Great updates.
This is the Todd Shapiro Show on Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.